you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Let's Talk Dyslexia. My name is Fadhillah and I'm the host and moderator of today's event. Before I begin, I would just like to ask, are you able to see me? If you are able to see me, just give a okay or thumbs up in the chat. Okay, fantastic. I believe you can see me right now. Thank you very much, everyone, for responding. All right, so just give me a moment while I toggle through. Okay, all right. Okay, so just let me introduce myself before we begin the program proper. My name is Fadhillah and I am the host and moderator of Let's Talk Dyslexia. Today, a little bit more about myself. I'm a mother to a dyslexic child. I'm also an author and an educator with Yaa Bunayya Singapore, the organizer of today's event. In conjunction with Raikan Ilmu by Yayasan Mendaki and Dyslexia Awareness Month, Yaa Bunayya Singapore is organizing a talk on dyslexia to help tighten the gaps and facilitate understanding on dyslexia. Now, we are very privileged to have with us on board the panel individuals who are invested in dyslexia. Now, before I invite the first speaker, I'd like to bring everyone's attention to the Q&A function of the webinar. So, as you can see, this is a webinar style of Zoom, so you don't have the function to turn on your video. But as this is a webinar, we have the Q&A function. You'll see it at the bottom of your screen. So there's a Q&A function over here. So I'll encourage everyone to drop your questions in the Q&A while the session is ongoing. You do not have to wait until the Q&A session towards the end of this program for you to drop any of the questions that you have. So as we're going through the program proper, with all of the different speakers, whenever you have a question that's popping up in your head, just drop it down in the Q&A function, and then that will help me as a moderator to collate the questions and ask during the Q&A session as well. So without further ado, I would like to invite Mariam. Before I bring her on board, just let me introduce a little bit more about her. So Siti Mariam is a senior lecturer at the DAS Academy, the training arm of Dyslexia Association of Singapore. She began her special education journey as an educational therapist at the DAS after leaving the mainstream school setting and has more than 8 years experience in the field of special educational needs, especially in dyslexia and math. She is also a lead educational therapist and a fellow with the Registrar of Educational Therapists Asia, or RETA, RETA for short. Her experiences with dyslexia intervention has increased her pedagogical knowledge and broadened her perspectives on special educational needs. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Mariam on board to begin the program proper with Unpacking Dyslexia. Thank you, Mariam.
Thank you, Farah. Assalamualaikum and good morning, everyone. So Farin has introduced myself. So yes, I'm Mariam and I will be unpacking dyslexia. So hopefully from my sharing, you have a better understanding of what dyslexia is. I've also prepared a set of slides, so let me share them. But just to check, am I coming across clear to everyone? Yes. Okay. All right. Okay, so I hope that you can see my slides. Okay, so yes, this is the definition of dyslexia. So if you look at the definition of dyslexia, it is a learning difficulty that primarily affects the skills involved in accurate and fluent word reading and spelling. So the characteristic features of dyslexia are difficulties in phonological awareness, basically associating sounds to the correct letters and vice versa. Verbal memory as well, which is a component of reading memory and processing speed. So just to illustrate, a child with poor phonological awareness, they may struggle to decode words, and this affects reading fluency. Now, if a child is able to make that letter sound association, but has poor memory, he or she may struggle to hold sounds in their mind long enough to decode an unfamiliar word. Because the sound disappears from his or her memory before it can be used to sound out the word. So let's use the word splash, okay, as an example. So splash, it has 5 sounds. So s, sh, okay. So now the working memory capacity of a typically developing child or adult is about ±7 pieces of information. Okay. However, for a child with dyslexia, okay, or with a learning difficulty, it's usually much lesser, okay, maybe 2 to 3 pieces of information. So if you go back to the word splash, right, okay, 5 sounds, okay, so the child with dyslexia may go, what was the first sound again? What was the second sound? No, so because they cannot remember, okay, the first sound or even the second sound, then they cannot put the sounds together in order to read the word. So because they cannot pull all the sounds together long enough to read the word, reading and then comprehending can be challenging. But before I explain further about this, okay, so what I would like to do is I want to engage you all. So perhaps I would like the audience to try and put themselves in the shoes of a child with dyslexia. Okay, so I'm going to show you a text, all right, and I want you to try and read the text, okay, to yourself in about 30 seconds. Okay, so let me just show you the text. Right, so here's the text. Okay, so as you read, okay, just take note that I'll be asking some questions after this. So read the text carefully. Okay, I'm going to start the timer now. 30 seconds starts now. Okay, so yes, they're all nonsense words, but try and make sense of them. Okay, try to put those sounds together and try to figure out, what the text is about. Right, in about 15 more seconds. Okay. Hope you are almost towards the end of the text. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, 30 seconds up. It's okay if you didn't manage to finish reading the text, but hope you managed to get the gist of it. Okay, so my first question is, anyone can put out your answers on the chat. Okay, we'll be able to see your responses on the chat. Okay, so my first question is, who did the main character live with? Okay, so for you to answer that question, right, first you need to identify who's the main character. Can anyone guess who's the main character? Okay, mother. Okay, the mother is the main. There's a little girl. Good. Okay, yes. So okay, you roughly tried to make sense of the text. That's good. Let's try the second question. There's a cottage there. Okay, where was the cottage? I think Husni, you're almost close. Florist. What does florist sound like? So where do you think the cottage is? Forest. Yes, thank you, Nadia. So yes, it is the forest. And okay, did anyone figure out who's the main character here? Who's the main character? So there's a mother, there's a little girl. What do you think this little girl is based on what you tried to make sense of the text? Okay, if I were to try and read it out for you, okay, so this is the actual text. Once upon a time, okay, there was a little girl, okay, who lived with her mother in a little cottage on the edge of a large dark forest. This little girl often wore a little red cloak, okay, with her pretty little red hat. And for this reason, people called her, any guesses? Little red cloak, little red hat. So she's actually Little Red Riding Hood. Okay, so what I'm getting you to do is, okay, they're all nonsense words, okay, but students with dyslexia will see words as it is. Okay, but because they can't put the sounds together, they can't make sense of the words may seem very foreign to them. Okay, so I'm also curious, how you tried to make sense of this passage. Okay, but regardless how you tried to make sense of this passage, I think the fact that this passage is all made up of nonsense words, and then you were tasked to answer questions on it, some of you maybe could have felt anxious, you could have felt stressed, Okay, maybe you're thinking, I only have 30 seconds to complete reading this. How is that enough time? Okay, so some of you could have felt frustrated, confused, asking yourselves if you're even reading this correctly and if it's all making sense to you. So perhaps you also could put it in the chat how you all felt, trying to make sense of the passage and then having to answer questions related to the nonsense passage. And helpless, okay, thank you, Hafiza. And of course, if you're not anywhere close to the end of the passage and you see, that timer ticking away, some of you could have started to feel helpless and gave up trying. So I'm looking at the chat now, and yes, I see some of you felt frustrated, confused, helpless, okay? But I just wanted to let you all know that there's nothing wrong with all those feelings because the passage was made up of nonsense words. Okay? There were extra processes involved before you could even focus on the meaning of the passage. And therefore, in a sense, your inability to answer the questions could be attributed to slow and inaccurate word reading. Okay, and this is one reason why some children with dyslexia have problems with reading comprehension. So it is due to that slow and inaccurate reading because they have not reached a certain level of reading fluency. Okay, therefore leaving few attentional resources available for comprehension. So now that you have somehow tried to put yourselves in the shoes of a child with dyslexia, you have a better understanding maybe of their difficulties, okay, reading difficulties, and therefore comprehension difficulties. Okay, but there are other difficulties as well. Okay, so if you have to go back to the example earlier, so learners with dyslexia have difficulty focusing on the meaning of the text when most or all their mental energies are directed at reading or decoding the words that make up the text. So imagine, if reading a single word can be a struggle, what more an entire text? And the effort taken to decode that entire text may not leave them with any mental energy left to focus on its meaning. So just imagine, you're trying to decode almost every single word in a text. You're going S, okay? Every word you're trying to put the sounds together, it actually takes up a lot of mental effort. Okay, so and if you don't have that automaticity, that fluency, okay, by the time you reach the end of the text, you can be so fatigued that you can't even focus on what the text means. So yes, it's true when you ask a child with dyslexia, like who's not quite automatic or fluent in reading, so what was text about? When they say they don't know, it's truly because they don't know. All the time spent was just trying to read the text. Okay? So the longer the text, the more difficult and effortful to read it. So this causes them to tire mentally and physically easily. So this does lead to reading comprehension problems. So when you're not able to focus on the meaning of the text, you're not able to access the information enough to answer the questions. So besides reading, okay, so there are also spelling difficulties. Okay, so for example, word substitution, okay, especially when there are similarities in the way the words are pronounced or look. So for example, like when and went, W-H-E-N and W-E-N-T. Words like see, S-E-E and S-E-A. So they sound alike, okay, but they mean differently. Okay, so they get confused on how to spell such words. Then they could also omit or add letters, especially when words have sounds that are pronounced, not pronounced distinctly. So I think in our context, it is true, we tend to drop our last consonants. So when we speak, I don't say I sent my child to the clinic. We somehow subconsciously just drop the ending t sound. And that's how students hear it. Okay, so they may just spell it as S-E-N. Okay, so words like shopping, okay, we know there's double P, but we don't say shopping, right? Okay, so there are certain words with silent letters like island, So these are the ones that can confuse students as well. Okay, then vowel confusion is quite common, especially with the interference with the mother tongue language. And vowels like the A and the E, very confusing for students with dyslexia because they do sound very much alike. And when there are several vowels in the word as well, okay, that can cause confusion for them. Okay, and I think something about the English language is not a transparent language. Okay, there are many ways to make one particular sound. So for example, like the A sound, the letter A can be A, AY can also make the A sound, as in day, EY, okay, can also make the A sound as in pray. So which vowel combination do you use to spell which word? So yes, English is a very confusing language, so it is harder for students with dyslexia as well. And then we also have the jumbled letter sequence. So this happens when the child relies on their visual memory of a word, and they don't try to use that letter sound knowledge to spell. Okay, so children who have not developed their visual memory skills cannot readily reproduce a sequence of visual stimuli. So they frequently experience difficulty in remembering the overall visual appearance of words. But they can't, they can remember the letters of a word. Okay, like roughly, oh, I know love has these letters, but they can't remember the exact order, okay, the exact sequence. So they may know the initial letter, but maybe not exactly how all the other letters are put in sequence. And writing is a multifaceted task. Okay, so it is very difficult. So going back to the characteristic features of dyslexia, working memory. Okay, so they have to hold so many things in mind, and they can't. They have to think about how to focus on grammar. They have to think of spelling, the vocab. So all of these causes them to have multiple errors. And they might be slow to write. Okay? They may be writing something, they're trying to remember what to write next. And as they finish writing that one sentence, they're like, hey, what was it I wanted to write next? I forgot. Okay, so writing is difficult for students with dyslexia as well. Okay, so some of them may choose to write lesser because then they will have lesser errors as well. Okay, so if you want to find out more about the signs and symptoms, okay, we do have a link. I've provided a link here. Okay, you can actually go onto the DS website. There's a list of all the different signs and symptoms of the different ages, how dyslexia can be manifested, okay, at the different stages. Okay, so to find out more, you can actually go on to the websites. Okay, there are other signs and symptoms that could signal that a child may have dyslexia. Okay, and another thing that I just wanted to bring your attention to is how executive function is related to dyslexia. So students with dyslexia can have executive function difficulties. So for example, in working memory, so we talked about working memory earlier just now. So they cannot hold the information long enough, okay, in order to complete the task. Okay, so cognitive flexibility is the ability to engage in and switch between multiple mental processes. Okay, so they may be quite fixated on one thing, so they can't apply their learning to another thing. So they can get stuck, okay, and they may choose not to move on until they solve that particular question. Okay, so that's poor cognitive flexibility. And then we also have inhibitory control. Okay, so students with dyslexia may have poor inhibitory control. Okay, they know that this word could have multiple meanings, but again, so it overlaps with cognitive flexibility. So they just fixated on that one meaning. So the context of the passage can be incorrect. Okay, and they may not be able to distract themselves from irrelevant information, and they can just jump in to solve a question. So it can be quite impulsive as well. All right, so with that, okay, hopefully you have a better understanding of dyslexia, but I will address some of the facts or the myth, okay, see whether you can just answer this yourself. Do you think it's a fact or a myth? So dyslexia affects up to 10% of the population. That's a fact. Okay, the prevalence of dyslexia amongst the school-going population is estimated to be between 4 to 10%. Okay, so this suggests that in a classroom of 40, there will be likely 1 or 2 diagnosed with dyslexia. Okay. Then dyslexia is a visual difficulty. That's a myth. Okay, it is a brain-based difficulty. It is not a visual difficulty. It's caused by a difficulty in processing sounds and symbols of the language. Okay, so yes, the letter reversals and all that could be reported by, they are reported by some students with dyslexia. These do not define dyslexia. Okay, these visual problems can affect those with dyslexia, but they are not the characteristic features. So yes, I just answered the next box. So that's a myth. Okay, I think flipping letters, writing them in mirror image might be symptoms that are easiest to explain. So it became known as a common stereotype of dyslexia symptoms. Okay, but again, dyslexia is more than just visual symptoms. Okay, and if you have more questions on this, we can address this in the Q&A. Okay, then people with dyslexia can succeed just by trying harder. Okay, they need proper intervention. They need the right support in order to succeed. Okay, if you just keep asking them to do the same thing over and over again, they are not likely to be able to overcome their difficulties. And dyslexia is not curable. Okay, it's not something that you can get a prescription for if you go to the doctor. It is a lifelong learning difficulty, but you overcome your difficulties through strategies that you are taught. Okay, and it also manifests differently at different life stages. And lastly, yes, dyslexia has a genetic predisposition. Okay, so a child with dyslexia is likely that the parent may have dyslexia, about 40 to 60%. That's the percentage. Okay, so the risk is increased when other family members also have dyslexia. Okay, so I'm sure if you have, you may have more questions on this, so we can definitely address this in the Q&A later. But thank you so much for paying attention to my segment, and I'll pass this all over to Farahin. Thank you, Farahin. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mariam, for that very insightful unpacking of dyslexia and what it is and what it means. And she also made everyone go through a brain exercise early this morning by making you use your mental energy and effort. So that shows how much a child or a student with dyslexia goes through every day, just going through school and when they are going through their academic work. So I'm now going to bring on our next speaker. Her name is Amirah. Before I bring her on, let me just introduce her to you. So Amirah holds a deep interest in students with special needs, having worked as a behavior therapist for children with autism prior to helping children with dyslexia. She joined Dyslexia Association of Singapore in 2016 as an educational therapist, and then later Dyslexia Association International in 2019 as a specialist tutor. She teaches literacy and mathematics to students with dyslexia and other specific learning differences in both group and individual settings. She believes that every child deserves the chance to find their own meaning of success and not what society expects from them. As an educational therapist, her journey is filled with stories of students discovering their potential and achieving success at a pace that fits them. So without further ado, let's welcome Amirah on board with supporting dyslexic learners. Thank you, Amirah.
Thank you. Thank you, Farahin. Okay, let me just pull up my slides. And I apologies in advance if parts of me just start to disappear or become blue because it's the app that I'm the background. Okay, so thank you, Mariam and Farahin. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this webinar. So as mentioned earlier, it happens to be World Dyslexia Awareness Month, and DS has a lot of things lined up. So if you can go ahead to our website, you can check out a few events that we have over there. And so I hope that you will be able to gain many takeaways regarding how to support dyslexic learners by the end of my presentation. If you have some questions throughout my presentation, do drop them in the chat or Q&A and I'll try to answer them. I think Ryan just introduced me, but I'll just mention it again. My name is Amirah and I'm a senior specialist tutor and educational therapist at DAS and DAS International. I work with students with dyslexia and other specific learning difficulties in both one settings, and also used to be a behavior therapist. So before we get into teaching strategies, let's have a quick look on what SPLD or specific learning difficulties or differences is. Okay, so it is an umbrella term for several learning difficulties, and dyslexia is one of them. Okay? So SPLD covers a range of learning difficulties that affects a person's ability to process information, fluency in spoken and written language, and even mathematical ability. Some developmental differences also includes physical ones, like a person's movement and their gross and fine motor. When these components are affected, so does the process of learning. And that's why their journey becomes a lot harder and effortful. So they would need a unique and tailored style of teaching, like what Mariam mentioned just now. Okay. And it's also important to note that a person diagnosed with SPLD are not intellectually disabled. That means it's not about their IQ, nor is it an effect of their socio-economic and language background. A lot of times people may dismiss a child's different learning needs because they attribute their challenges to some of the reasons I mentioned just now. Yeah. Okay, so as mentioned, SPLD refers to many different types of difficulties that affect the person's learning. Some common ones are dyslexia, ADHD or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, dysgraphia, dyspraxia, and dyscalculia. So I think most people may have only heard of the first two, dyslexia and ADHD. But the other difficulties are lesser known, I'm sure. Okay, so for today we'll be focusing on dyslexia, but do bear in mind that dyslexia is commonly co-occurring with any of these SPLD shown here. Okay, all right. So predominantly in DAS, we support students who are diagnosed with dyslexia in areas like literacy, math, and even their creative ability. So very quickly, can you just drop in the chat what comes to mind, or what do you understand from dyslexia before you currently, or before you really got into learning about it? Can I just see some responses? What do you know about dyslexia, or what comes to mind? Okay, so difficulty in phonemic awareness, difficulties in reading and writing, not being able to read, writing, writes in opposite way, so they can only see in their way, losing vowels. Okay. All right, so yeah, thank you for your contribution. So yeah, dyslexia is commonly understood by the general public that a dyslexic person has difficulties in reading and spelling, and even writes with reverse letters like what Mariam mentioned just now. Yeah, while that is true for many dyslexic people, the degree of challenge really varies from one person to another, and they experience other challenges as well. Okay. So dyslexia is okay, just quickly, I'm just gonna quickly repeat a little bit of what Mariam has mentioned. So dyslexia is a difficulty that stems from phonological component of language, and it basically means that it's difficult for them to store and recall speech sounds and matching the sounds to its representational form, which is the alphabet itself. Thus, it gives rise to poor spelling. So they also face difficulties in word recognition, which is basically reading, and reading comprehension, which is what Mariam did the little activity about understanding what they read. So therefore, the task of understanding and reading is definitely not an easy one for them. Yeah. So logically, they have an aversion towards language task, which is often then misunderstood as laziness or rebellion. Yeah. So attention, behavioral, and emotional problems may arise due to the learning challenges that they face. Yeah. Okay, so here is just an example of one of my students who especially struggle with spelling and phonological awareness. And you can see some of them, they have reversal, like letter reversals, the order of letters are not there. So yeah, so some of the difficulties. All right, dyslexia is not an illness, so there is no cure for dyslexia, as it is a lifelong condition. Nevertheless, interventions can be tailored according to their needs to help them achieve success. Yeah, as they learn the strategies to help them cope with and manage their learning. Okay, so the intervention comprises of two parts, which is the OG principles, which stands for Orton Gillingham principles, and providing a dyslexia-friendly learning environment. Okay. So I'm just going to touch a bit on OG principles. They are made up of 6 principles, which structured, sequential, and cumulative, multisensory, diagnostic, cognitive, emotional, and emotionally sound. So these principles are proven to be effective strategies when supporting dyslexic learners. Essentially, when adopting these principles, the lessons are structured from being structured. They are also planned from one lesson to another throughout the long term, which is what sequential and cumulative means. Okay, so the skills are taught gradual and step by step. So multisensory is to stimulate their thinking when they go through the lessons. Diagnostic and prescriptive is planning according to their needs. And cognitive is so that the learners understand what and why they are learning the strategies. And finally, the emotionally sound means to boost their motivation and self-esteem. Okay. So besides tailored programs, other aspects like learning environment and tools should also be centered around being dyslexia friendly. For example, studies have shown that dyslexic learners read better with black font or buff, cream, pastel colors, rather than on white paper or screens. I mean, it is too glaring, even for some of us who are not dyslexic. Yeah, and highlighters are also very good because the different colors will aid their attention and eye tracking when reading. Okay, so this is an example of like a pastel color. Yeah, I think for notices posted or pasted up on walls in the classroom or in their learning environment, many educational therapists like myself don't prefer to put up any or too many, as they may distract them from focusing. So yeah, nevertheless, I do sometimes put up 1 or 2 because to help them in the concepts that they are weak in, and to allow them to refer to them until they gain automaticity. Yeah, so they will refer to them, and then eventually they will not have to rely on them. Okay, the next one is about the font. I'll just go through this pretty quickly. So yeah, the font is very, very important because it's you have to choose fonts that are very clear and will aid in their reading. So there is a special dyslexia font, but these fonts are also great because the letters are not too close to each other. And I personally use, I love to use Century Gothic because the letters are rounded, and the letter A is how students will write them. So it doesn't cause much confusion. Okay. So now we will be going into support strategies, which I have branched them out to be daily routine, teacher's instruction, differentiation, multisensory, preference-based, and most importantly, awareness and acceptance. Okay, first up, daily routine. Learners do well when they are informed upfront of the activities for the day, as it reduces anxiety. So they will have an overview of what's going to happen or what is needed from them. Okay? And then crossing them in a checklist also provides a sense of achievement when they, which then builds their confidence. So it's almost complete, right? When they check one by one. Yeah. And it is also important to plan the structure of the lesson around the learner's profile. So this involves getting to know them, yeah, with regards to their challenges, maybe from their psychological report, from interviews from their parents or teachers. Okay. And lastly, they usually need breaks in between tasks, because you should remember that the tasks are very effortful for them. And these breaks are part, or should be part, of the intervention that is aiding in their learning. I have students who need a short break between almost every task, as once it gets too long, their short attention span will not allow them to absorb anything else I say. So that's why I say that the breaks is part of the intervention. Okay. Next is teachers' instruction. Okay, so learners may have difficulty following instructions, so the teacher should keep their instructions short and clear, while only giving 1 or 2 at a time, so that the learners are able to catch up and process them within their means. Okay, so you can get them to repeat the instructions out loud to you to help them process and remember them better. The teacher should also empathize when their learners need those instructions to be repeated. So try not to get angry when they ask or when they don't remember. You can just empathize and repeat for them. Okay. So the next part is differentiation. Differentiation is being mindful of each of every student's ability and also anticipating the response coming from each learner. The teacher needs to consider the level of difficulty of the task that the learner can manage and the amount of work given to prevent anxiety and promote a sense of achievement instead of consistent failure. And you know that the students are already experiencing difficulty. So the least we can do is make them feel that they're doing well, while they are doing the task, while they are completing the task. Okay. So mediums of work should also be flexible and not just restricted to paper. They have enough of them in school, which unfortunately are already associated to negative emotions. So learners actually get excited and motivated when they get to use the whiteboard, iPads, Post-its, stickers, whatever that you can get your hands on, or even answer verbally, as the objective is to get them to participate and think about the work at hand instead of focusing on writing it out. So some of them, because they have difficulty writing, so they will invest more energy and unnecessary energy to write it out. So we don't want to add to that pressure. Okay. So tools like pencil grip is designed to aid learners with motor impairments to write comfortably. And the last one is the time. So the learners also work at different speeds, so it should be acceptable to give them more time. Yeah, and we have the environment as well, which is the classroom or at home, that should be conducive for them. For example, like I mentioned before, avoid pasting up too many posters, as they can be very distracting. And a noisy environment will also trigger anxiety, and the focus will run from there. Okay. So these are some examples of my own where I've used different mediums to make lessons more interactive. Okay. Yeah, whiteboards. What do you have? The projector, the whiteboards, the iPads. Yeah. Okay, so for this one student, he has trouble with attention, and writing it was very effortful for him. So while others filled up the answers at the top, he answered verbally and was only tasked the last few questions. So this is an example of differentiation, and also according to their ability, okay, and different medium of answering. Yeah. Okay, so next is multisensory. So it's a very important strategy to ensure your lessons are multisensory, because I personally make sure that my activities are stimulating at least 3 senses. Okay, so that the students are engaged and thus able to learn something from them. Yeah, so you can include movement, especially for students who are unable to sit for long periods of time. I think I mentioned before that dyslexia is commonly co-occurring with another SPLD, for example, ADHD, right? So that explains them, needing to move around. Yeah, it's important to understand that they actually think better while moving. Okay, and another example is fidgeting. Okay, some learners actually need that in order to stay focused. So I have a student who sometimes bring in a fidget spinner or even the blue tack. Yeah, they like to just fiddle with the blue tack while he's actually listening, while he's actually participating. Okay. I love to use manipulatives, games, and incorporate technology to keep them actively engaged. Dyslexic learners are usually put off by too many words, so visual aids help them understand better. Okay, so there are some instances where I included games, manipulatives, hands-on activities in the lessons. So the students definitely learn better, so as their senses are ignited, helping them to participate. Yeah. If you think about it, manipulatives like this are very common in preschool, right? But somehow they stop when the students get into primary and secondary school because they are expected to transition into purely worksheets or mostly worksheets. Yeah, but yeah, so that's where dyslexic learners can be deprived and they struggle to keep up. Okay. Yeah, multisensory learning has also been proven to help learners retain better what they've learned, hence improving their memory. Okay, so here are some more examples of games and technology being used. All right, the next one is another very important strategy, which is to tailor lessons around the student's preference, hobbies, and likes. So although learners benefit from multisensory approach, each one of them has a dominant learning style, which is either visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. The teacher will then be able to plan more activities to stimulate that dominant style. So I say dominant because they don't only have one. They might have, of course, we will benefit from all learning style, but maybe this student would be more engaged when there's more visuals, or more engaged when there's more listening activities. Yeah. Okay. So from my own experience, the first lesson is very important to build instant rapport and motivate students to keep coming back. With activities that involve their hobbies, they are more interested to participate and therefore learn well. Yeah. So rewards can also be effective, especially with younger learners, but the type and frequency need to be carefully planned. Okay. So here I've used Legos that my boys love so much to facilitate the tasks. Okay, and this is an example of motivating the students with stickers, rewards to promote task compliance. So on the right is a game that highlights a winner. Word of caution though, not every student can handle not winning. So it depends on the profile of your learners or class dynamic. Unless you want to take the opportunity to talk about giving others a chance to win, things like that. Yeah. Okay. Lastly, which I feel is the most important of all, is the awareness and acceptance of such learning difficulties and acceptance and of their different pathways towards success, and even the very definition of success itself. These should start with parents and teachers, as they have more influence over young minds and how they would perceive themselves. Okay, so awareness and acceptance from teachers are not only to help tailor lessons, but to also educate the other students of unique challenges that their friend is facing. So especially when you are in a mainstream classroom, in MOE schools, right? So it's important to get their classmates also to understand. Okay. So this in turn cultivates empathy and promotes inclusion in the learner's environment that will spur them on in their journey. Yeah, but having said that, I think it's also important to remove the mindset that students with learning differences are somehow disadvantaged because it's not an illness. So there's always this negative perception about it, around it. So let me just share with you, just yesterday after my class ended, and I was chatting with my student's mom about applying for exam accommodations for her. And then she suddenly typed in behind her mom, is there something wrong with me? Yeah, so when she said that, it was immediately we hugged her and like, no, it's not. We're just talking about how to help you, and so you can learn better, Yeah, so needing a tailored and differentiated instruction shouldn't be deemed as a bad thing. And I hope the kids will grow to understand it. Yeah. So that's all from me. Thank you so much for listening. And I'm sure you have a lot of questions. I'll hand it over back to Brian.
Thank you very much, Amirah. So Amirah shared a wealth of knowledge and strategies on how we can support dyslexic learners. And I counted, it's definitely more than 5. I think it was like 9 strategies that she shared on how you can support dyslexic learners. And she also mentioned something called exam accommodation. So dyslexic learners who have been diagnosed with dyslexia, they are able to get exams accommodations for school and national-based exam. This is something that we can find out more about probably at the end of the session, or even, if you have any more questions about it, you can drop it in the Q&A. Now, I would like to welcome our last and final speaker, Fadhillah. So Fadhillah, let me just introduce her before she comes on board. Fadhillah is a mom to a teenage son with dyslexia. Her son was diagnosed with dyslexia at the age of 7. As a mother, Fadhillah focuses on her son's strengths and supports him to cultivate his skills and interests. Fadhillah is also an events and marketing officer with Project Dignity. The social enterprise restores dignity to differently able and disadvantaged through vocation with passion. Fadhillah finds her role with Project Dignity fulfilling, and during her free time, she enjoys reading and Zumba. So thank you, Fadhillah, for coming on board, and I'll hand it over to you.
Hi, Assalamualaikum, everybody. Good morning. I'm not too sure whether I'm sound clearly to you guys, but I would like to apologize if there's any background noise. Tell you what, I'll share my screen first. Give me a minute, yeah. Okay, so I guess you guys able to see my slide right now. So journey with me. All right, I'm Nur Fadhillah, mother to Mama Aikel. All right, so as introduced by Miss Brian, you may see either Zumbaing or reading. Either or is my me time. Previously, I worked as a program specialist in Mendaki Sense. So currently, I'm in events and marketing. So I work kind of a few profiles. So I understand where dyslexia is incurable, because I liaise with some of the individual where they can't really read, even though they are at the age of like 30 plus or 40 plus. So working in this Project Dignity, I guess I discovered my interest for my son. So Mama Aikel is my only child, and he is 16 years old now. Right, so knowing that my son is in dyslexia, so I watch this kind of inspirational movies. And yeah, when have I learned about dyslexia? So I learned that dyslexia is a learning disorder which involves difficulty reading, spelling, and writing. So that's when my son during his preschool time, sadly he got scolded by me, my family members, when we teach him. So we usually compare him with my nieces and nephews who's born brighter than him. And I also thought that he's lazy and slow, and not knowing, I didn't even know about his difficulties at that point of time. And also he also does have hard times in maths classes during his primary school years. So I guess this is called dyscalculia. I'm not too sure. Right. So yeah, at what age he was diagnosed and how old is he now? Like I share with you, he is 16 years old. So during his preschool, he studied in JB. So the teachers advised him to practice more on alphabet, and he is only good in writing Chinese character, where I think he likes strokes more. So when he is in primary one, he studied in first Topai primary school. So his form teacher shared with me that he is diagnosed with dyslexia. So that's when he starts his LSP and SDR classes. So during the in primary classes, right, the specialist shared with me to encourage him in reading and spelling. They even shared on how to teach, like reading and spelling, break up the words into 2 to 3 parts, vowel pronunciation, reading using ruler, as my son tends to read different words from different paragraph or line. So using the ruler helps him better by words and by line. For mathematics, I need to use items like simple things like pencils or pens when he's doing counting at home, doing showing him graphics, do small numbers like sums. Because when he was in primary school, it's very hard for me to teach him even a simple additional questions. So all of it, he attended at the LSP classes. He managed to, but also at the same time, also he is dissed by his classmates, saying that he's slow, so he don't have that confidence anymore studying. When he was in primary 6, he did tell me that he doesn't want to school anymore. He want to quit studying because he say everybody call him stupid, everybody call him slow. So the teachers put him aside to study, teach him one by one. At home, I have to teach him one level down compared to all his nieces and nephews. His cousins. I need to teach him one level down. Let's say if he is in primary 5, I need to teach him by primary 4 or primary 3 levels, kind of sums. So he unable to go to normal standard school. He is sent to Northlight School. And then at a point of time where I thought that, oh, maybe he got dyslexia, so he cannot go to normal school. But I was wrong, because there is some individual did share with me, not because of dyslexia, that your son cannot go to normal school. So that's where I understand, okay, maybe because he failed his maths. Like I say, he have hard times in his mathematics, so he can, he don't pass his maths. Right, so in Northlight, he is given the opportunity to receive scholarship to attend DAS at Rex House and online learning. So he have to attend this dyslexia test to see which level he is in. Miss Amirah is his never change teacher who teach him English throughout from year 2 and until now present. And he gained his confidence through these classes with Miss Amirah and also Miss Chen from Northlight, in-house dyslexic specialist for year 1 and next year 1 till present. So he gained his confidence in reading and counting. He even shows me how to manage, how he managed to do mathematics workings for problem sums questions. Like previously, he unable to even a simple additional sum he can't even do the workings. And then he currently able to like read subtitles, the signboards, and also he's able to try to read and try to find the right pronunciation, which I believe the constant teaching with the same teachers and support from family and his surroundings, such as his school teachers, his school organized activity, which he is involved in Majula, really influenced his learning. He gained confidence when he did his best and get knowledge. All right. So my hope for the dyslexic children, yes, no doubt that in this era, everybody knows about dyslexia, and somehow some people give them lower expectations. Like myself, when he was in primary school, I say, okay, never mind, it's okay, you can success in your study anyway, so just do your best. That's what I tell my son. So I literally lowered down my expectation, but he kind of like teach me, show me, prove me wrong, that when I lower his expectation, he will try to show me more. So kind of like they are differently able in so many ways. They have their strengths. Then at that point in time when he was in Northlight right now, then I realized that he have talents and skills, and he get motivation from his schools and teachers. Right, so motivation does matter. Like I said previously, when he was in primary school, he doesn't have the confidence to school anymore. He don't want to study anymore. But when he go to Northlight school, he met with people from Northlight, and then they support him a lot. And I guess that's the end of my sharing.